Kashmir Road, Clonard Gardens, Cawnpore, Lucknow, Benares, Bombay, Keane, Waterville,
Kashmir Road,
Tralee,
Clonard Gardens,
Bantry,
Cawnpore, Lucknow,
Oranmore,
Benares, Bombay,
Dunmore,
Keane, Waterville, Tralee, Bantry, Oranmore, Dunmore, Leaville and Cooper.
Tralee, Bantry, Leaville, Cooper and the Springfield Road. The 14 streets plus one. A curious mixture of names, both homegrown and exotic, which together make up the area known as Clonard. A collection of neat terrace streets dominated by the Gothic church of the Most Holy Redeemer and the decaying relics of an industrial past. The future is uncertain for Clonard. The only thing of which the residents can be certain is that as plans for the redevelopment are drawn up, time for the familiar, well-loved terraces is running out. We often say that walls have ears, and if they do then, perhaps streets have voices, echoes of neighbours' friendly chatter, the laughter of children's play, and the clatter of conflict.
The Gaelic name Clonard means the high meadow, and less than 100 years ago the site of Clonard was exactly that. Clonard House, the home of the Kennedy family who made their fortune in the flax spinning industry, stood alone in 14 acres of parkland, bounded by Cooper Street and the Springfield Road. But by 1896, both the house and the gardens had become the property of McConnell's estate agents, who were already planning the streets that would become the Clonard area. The 19th century saw Belfast develop into an important industrial centre. As its shipbuilding and linen industries found worldwide fame, the city expanded rapidly, as did its Catholic population. From only a few thousand at the beginning of the century, the number of Belfast Catholics had increased to 100,000 by its close, as people flocked citywards, fleeing the ravages of the famine and hoping for work in new industries. It was in response to the spiritual needs of the burgeoning Catholic population of West Belfast that Bishop Henry invited the Redemptorists to take up residence in Clonard House, which he had purchased from the McConnells. The history of the Clonard area, its people and the Redemptorist community are inseparable. Within 6 months, the congregations had outgrown Clonard House, and the first Clonard church was quickly built on a strip of land by the Mill Dam. Because of its corrugated iron roof, it came to be known as a tin church. Mass was heard there for 14 years, and when it was knocked down in 1911, some of it was used to build an extension to Clonard House. On October the 4th, 1908, the Redemptorist Order opened another chapter in their history as work commenced on the Gothic-style Church of the Most Holy Redeemer. Designed by Belfast architect J.J. MacDonald, whose sons were many years later buried in its crypt, the church was built over 3 years at a cost of £32,000. The church was dedicated in a solemn ceremony on Rosary Sunday, October the 1st, 1911, and was to figure largely in the life of the Clonard area on countless occasions and in many different ways.
history of Clonard has also been a history of the conflict in the north of Ireland. As early as 1899, Clonard people were preparing to defend their homes and their church from sectarian attack. In the 1920s, the streets of Clonard witnessed many bloody incidents.
This is a photograph of one of our brothers, Michael Morgan, a native of Cavan, who was shot dead here, where we are standing, on the 22nd of July, 1920. It was a time when there was a great lot of rioting going on in this part of Belfast, particularly in the Clonard area. A lot of firing by the military in Kashmere Road area and down the falls, during which quite a number of people were shot dead and many injured. But at this particular occasion, Brother Michael had come up here to do a job of some sort or other. There was firing going on outside, and if you like, rather imprudently, he went to the window just to have a look out. The soldiers outside seemed to have been looking up at the monastery. They more than once made it known to us that they suspected Clonard of harbouring snipers and allowing us to use snipers to fire from it, which we never did. The moment Michael Morgan showed his face at the window, fire was opened. He shouted out, "My God, they're going to shoot." There was another brother near him. He heard him, and at that moment, Michael fell dead, just very near where I am standing. Several bullets pierced his lungs. The priest in charge heard the shooting here, rushed up. He was afraid at first to go near Michael because of the continual shooting. He did finally, he gave him the last rites, and his body was brought away then. He was, as I said, a young man, 28, and a very pleasant young man and very popular. So it was a great, great tragedy. But it was only one of a number of fatal shootings and many woundings that were taking place all around us those terrible days of the end of July 1920.
Conflict of another sort affected the Clonard area in the war years. The privations were as hard for the people of Clonard as they were for other parts of Belfast.
The hungry 30s, dreadful. And when boys grew up in their teens, there was no work for them, so automatic, and the Brum, case packed away to Brum it was everybody, say, always wait to Brum the night. That was basic. Everybody just had to get moving and get a job in England, because there was no work here for them.
Mackie's Foundry was one of the North's most famous industries. Although situated on the edge of the Clonard district, precious few Clonard men ever found work there. Instead, it drew its workforce from neighbouring Protestant communities.
Mackie's came up and down the Kashmere Road, and they came up and down Cooper Street, and then coming near the 12th, they kind of stopped. They took another route.
And there was a smell of them you were talking?
You could always smell Mackie's off them. You know, the oil and the smells you get of work shops. You had to smell the oil.
Although the Clonard area always had its fair share of tradesmen and professionals, work for many has been and remains difficult to find, and the daily bread of many's an ordinary family was won by the nimble fingers of the women folk employed in the mills and factories of Belfast's famous linen industry.
It was hard and very noisy. You couldn't hear. We had to talk into each other's ears. You know, if you wanted to speak to anybody, you hold, over at them, and then they knew you want them, and we just talked. We would have talked with our hands over them, and then they would have come over to you, and you spoke into their ears. Very, very noisy.
On the Grosvenor Road, at 6 o'clock every night, it was black with women coming from the warehouses. Everybody went down and worked in the warehouse, shirt factories, linen factories, whatever, and you walked the whole way up the road. And it was black with workers. That's no longer. As you know, there's none of that now. That's all gone. The city, you see downtown, that was all warehouses, big shirt factories, linen warehouses. That's all gone now. The same as the factories around here are gone. Elliott's and Blackstaff.
With Mackey's playing such an important role in the war effort, the chances of a German attack were high. Clonard people listening to Lord Haw-Haw were alarmed by his apparent knowledge of Belfast. Once he even referred to Clark's whitewashed house beside Mackey's. The Germans struck on Easter Tuesday 1941 on what became known as the Belfast Blitz. Over 800 people died in what the German news agency described as a mass attack, comparable in its effects to the heaviest attacks which had been inflicted upon the ports and armament centres of Britain.
You heard the drone of the plane and the whistle of the bomb coming down, and the save you heard the whistle, you were all right. To me, the shelters weren't much good, you know. They were only like bloody dog channels, you know. And if a bomb did hit them, you had an open hell like it did.
During the air raids, some Clonard people found refuge in the crypt of Clonard Monastery.
It was open to women and children only, and they crowded in here from the Shankill Road and the streets around Bombay Street, Monastery, and all about. It is said that you could have had 300 people here at the time. The wall down there was broken open and some went into another cellar. It was a marvellous time in many ways, frightening of course, but when they came here first, an eyewitness told us recently, a Protestant lady who's in Carrickfergus, she remembered the Catholics stood at one end, more or less, the Protestants at the other, a bit shy of one another because they didn't meet that often. They sang their own hymns. The Catholics then had the rosary beads and prayed like anything. The Protestants looked on in astonishment. But gradually they all saw it and they became very warm friends and sang the same hymns and probably prayed the same prayers. And so it remained. They drank tea, they passed the time, and they stayed as long as the air raid sirens were there. Now, they came here a number of times, I don't know how many, but it was a wonderful example of the unity between all classes that we would love to have today. Clonard Crypt.
In spite of its proximity to Mackey's, Clonard escaped the worst, and only one house, McCluskey's, was badly damaged.
The front room, there wasn't a piece of the ceiling. If I had left my son, he's a big man now, he's 52, he would have been killed. The ceiling came down, the roof was off, the beams were hanging down. And the light, electric, the bulb was still hanging on that beam and it was still lighting.
1 year later, on Easter Sunday 1942, one of the most famous and tragic incidents associated with the Clonard area took place. An RUC patrol coming down the Cashmere Road was ambushed by the IRA. Police Constable Murphy was shot dead. The police pursued their attackers to a house in Conpore Street, where the 6 men were captured. As the OC in charge, 19-year-old Tom Williams took responsibility. The men were taken to Crumlin Road Jail, where Tom Williams's friend Alfie Hannaway had been interned at the outbreak of the war.
The 6 of them were sentenced to death, and then there was a terrible hue and cry throughout the country for to have them reprieved. And everybody, you know, was working on that. You know, the Republican movement were working on it. The Cardinal Dalton was onto it. De Valera was onto it. There was people contacting the Americans, and the Americans were onto it. There were everybody. There was thousands upon thousands of signatures lodged with the Northern Ireland Home Office here, and everybody was hoping that there would be a reprieve. But we didn't know it. On the Sunday before the 2nd of September, the 6 of them were brought together, and the solicitor told them that 5 of them had been reprieved, but Tom was to pay the penalty. And Tom immediately, the fellas kind of broke down. They couldn't accept that they were going to be let off and Tom was going to die. But Tom said that this was the way he wanted it. He told them, he said, "I've prayed for this," he said, "and this is the way I want it." And he was glad that they were being reprieved, but that he was going to die. Well, when we heard the news that Tom was left to die and the others were reprieved, that we were just numb. We couldn't react to it at all. You just couldn't believe that had happened, that the situation had changed so much inside so short a time. Within a couple of days, 5 men were reprieved and the other one was going to die, and we couldn't believe that they would even let that happen. And we were hoping against hope that there would be another reprieve and at the last minute and Tom would get off, but it wasn't to be anyway, and it was very evident that on the Tuesday that Tom was going to die. Father Oliver, who was our chaplain, as I said, he came in a little early and he told us that he had been with the other priests who had attended Tom, and that they had to waken him actually in the cell. He had slept all night, and they actually had to waken him for Mass. He talked to us a bit about Tom, and then he went into vest for Mass. And when he came out onto the altar, he turned round. At that time the priest had his back to him when he was saying the Mass. He turned round on the altar and he said that he had timed the consecration of the Mass for 8 o'clock. And he said that when he held up the Blessed Host, he would be making the sacrifice to God. He said, "You'll know at the exact time I'm doing that. Tom is also making his sacrifice." And that, I would say, was a terrible moment for everybody that was in that part of the prison I was in. And you've heard the song written by Arthur Carr after Tom was executed, the Ballad of Tom Williams. And there's a part of it in it where he says, "Unshamefully I saw men weep." And my recollection of that is that that's about the truest words that I've known about any song, because I actually seen that happening. I seen men of between 50 to 60 years and getting younger down to my own age group, all just openly weeping.
In August 1969, Belfast again erupted in violence, and the Clonard area paid a heavy price. The events of August the 15th left 15-year-old Gerard Macaulay dead and dozens of families homeless.
There was this sudden eruption from the Shankill Road area on the 15th of August, and in the feast day of Our Lady, actually, in the afternoon, early afternoon apparently, a mob broke through the barriers such as they were, and they were not as they are today. They broke through the area and they burnt the street, most of it except a few houses there at the end, some of Kashmir, and they set fire to St. Gall's, but it wasn't burnt down, partly only. And then they surged along Waterville Street beside the monastery. This was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we at the time were almost convinced that the monastery was going to be attacked and burnt. The priest went down to the cellar. The Blessed Sacrament was taken away from the community chapel and brought down too. And we were just ready for the worst.
It was a planned thing, because the RUC came in and done raids and lifted all the old IRA men and any bits of guns that they had. Mackey's factory was over here. They were let out early that day and went down these streets very quietly, and when they were in their own areas, they just turned on the Clonard area.
I was working up at Andersonstown, and the boss came round about 2 o'clock and he told me, "You'd better go home." He said, "There's trouble on that road you live on, Cashmere Road." And I came home, and I came down to the bottom of the Cashmere, and there was a trailer across, and there was stone throwing on between us and them. They had a barricade across it at the bottom, and we had a trailer across at the corner of Bombay Street and Cashmere Road, and we were standing behind it throwing stones down at them. And there was a small man, I won't mention no names, and he had a hammer and he was breaking up the flags into small pieces for us to throw at them. After about an hour, it settled down, and I walked up Bombay Street to look for my daughter. And the first thing I knew, I was lying on my back on the ground. I got shot in the back. And then four fellas came out of Cooper Street and came up round the corner and shot me twice. Once in the chest and in the stomach. And the next thing I remember, I was in Royal Victoria Hospital.
They were burning right along, and Alec was trying to get people out and protect his own home. And Alec was shot. His friend Michael Collins was shot, and a man from across the column was there, Ewan, he was shot, and young Jared McCauley was shot dead. There was quite a few others wounded that nobody knew their names. They were just carted off to the hospital.
It was a very dramatic, frightening time for everyone. And just when things seemed that way, fires blazing all round, people in an awful state had fled away from the houses, gone everywhere. Our own people came along from different parts of the area and further afield to the street to confront the mob coming in, the Orange Mob as it was called. They helped to stop them. The soldiers appeared soon after too, but I think their presence certainly helped, but it did stop the moment that advance. And it was the turning of the tide in the meantime, but Bombay Street was left in ruins, as you can see there. Very frightening photograph, very tragic. It's like what it must have been during the Blitz in Belfast.
Since that time, the Clonard area has been enclosed by the peace line. Few Clonard families were untouched by the troubles of the following years. Over the years, Clonard has been home to many talented sportsmen, entertainers and artists. Sean Maguire was born in Dublin, but raised in the Clonard area of Belfast, where he attended St Paul's School. He has fond memories of Clonard, which he calls the musical mile.
During the war years, Clonard man J.G. Devlin was one of a group of young men who formed the Oranmore Players. He went on to become famous on stage and screen, starring in local plays and appearing in TV shows like Steptoe and Son, and films such as No Surrender. However, one of the area's best loved personalities never went on stage professionally, although widely acknowledged as one of the city's funniest and most influential comics, the late, great Jerry Miller. A Kerrykill man by birth, Jerry married into the Clonard area and spent his life performing tirelessly for countless charities, causes, and of course did many's ado for a wee priest. This immensely talented, genuinely humble man, his jokes, his songs, and his mutton dummies are sorely missed. Sporting excellence from the boxing ring and the swimming pool to the green baize and the world of pigeon fancying has figured largely in the Clonard story, winning fame for the area both locally and at world-class levels.
When I was fighting in the ring, I was always representing the people of the Clonard and the Cashmere Road, and I didn't like to disappoint them. I loved to win, and I always trained hard. So they could never say that I didn't keep fit. If I got beat, I was beat, and if I always tried my best for them, and for myself too, like. But the support from Clonard were brilliant. Commonwealth Games, I came home and I was very tired, and I got into the house, and people were shaking my hand and all and welcoming me. But I went into bed for a half an hour, and my mother wakened me and she says, "Come on, there's somebody here to meet you." And she didn't tell me there was a party for me or anything from it. And those kids want to see your silver medal. Well, I got up and got washed, and Mummy gave me a clean shirt and put your tie on and getting me cleaned up for the. And I didn't know, and then she says, "There's someone at the children at the door there, I want to see you." And I went out, and the people all pulled me out, and there was a band and a stage in the street, and there was a big party going on.
The people of Clonard have a long and proud history of support for and success in Gaelic games.
But don't you ever seen anybody stand a corner on a Sunday afternoon? We're all up Corrigan Park and McCrory Park supporting Clonard. You know, and it was a household name. In the corners after the matches, discussions was going on right into the early hours of the morning. There was a great atmosphere about it this week. Thanks to the four men who started it, the late Charlie Campbell, Tommy Devlin, and Bill Kelly, their first team captain, and the late Alfie McGarry. Them people should be saints. They started a great thing in this area.
On Monday, after the Sunday match, all the boys used to stand on here, Clonard, all you could hear was Clonard.
The GA gives everybody an identity. If everyone runs it right, it puts a bit of pride in them, and themselves and their district and their families. That's what it's all about. And anybody in the GAA will tell you, if you play against any Clonard club, you know after the match you had a game, whether you win or lose. They'll give you 100%.
The best experience I had running out, putting a team out on the field in the Martin Cup final, that was my greatest, the day we won it. To see this expression them kids' faces after a match and them getting their medals, you know, I thought that'll live with me all my life, you know. That's the best thing that ever happened to me in Clonard.
Swimming, as both sport and social recreation, has played a large role in Clonard life, with the area producing not one, but two top-class clubs.
Clonard Swimming Club was formed in 1922. It was a group of lads that played football for the Hibs. They were on the way to a match in the markets, and they were told there was shooting in the area. So they decided to go to the rock dam to kick the ball about. And some of the lads that was there said they'd love to go in for a swim. And in the talk, they found out there was a few of them couldn't swim. So they arranged a meeting in the bakery facing Falls Bass and decided to form a swimming club so that they could learn the lads to swim. And that is how Clonard was formed. Their first victory was in the Junior Cup in 1924. And in 1937, they won their first senior Irish Cup. And they just went on from there. 53, 54, 55, they won the Senior Irish Cup. On to the 60s, 1960. They had a 14-year consecutive run of Senior Irish Cups. I don't think 14 will ever be equalled again.
Among the many sadly missed individuals whose personalities added to the unique character of Clonard was Dominic, the paperman. For 30 years, Dominic cut a familiar figure through the streets of the district, in good weather and bad, in peaceful times and troubled. One of the highlights of the Clonard calendar is the annual Solemn Novena.
In the early years, the numbers were incredible, that came here 6 times and more a day. There were queues waiting the whole length of Clonard car park. It was like going into a football match in the old times, or picture house. That remained for a number of years. Then the novena spread to other churches. Naturally, the numbers fell here. During the time of the Troubles, 69 and those years, the number fell dramatically because an awful lot of people were afraid to come to this very troubled part of Belfast. Then it took new life again, and people were getting encouraged to come back here. Then, about 10 years ago, we introduced what's called the Solemn Novena, such as we have now. Emphasis on 9 particular days of prayer. That immediately led to a terrific increase in attendances for these 9 days.
It was started by an American priest, and it fostered devotion to the Mother of Jesus, and we believe that she speaks on our behalf. We do acknowledge that God must come first, and we address him first. But we also believe, because she is his mother, that she will not be refused if she asks on our behalf. And I would say the people who come here have a very special devotion to Our Lady. I know I have, and I've reared a big family, and without that devotion to Our Lady, I would have despaired at times over the years. But I just come down here, and I pray, and I go away, and I know that all will be well.
Close by the monastery is St Gall's Boys' School. Famous past pupils include John Goff, who refereed the 1983 All-Ireland final against Galway in Dublin. The school has a proud record of sporting achievements.
Over the years, we've always had a strong tradition of Gaelic games, Gaelic football teams, hurling teams, handball teams. As well as that, over the years, they were renowned as being one of the best choirs in the vicinity. They entered a fiche for years and used to win it every year up until the time, and they discovered that they were the only choir to take part in the thing. So after that, they competition ended, presumably because St. Gall's were so good. I'm led to believe now that the area will be redeveloped, so it'll be a new beginning, and please God at that time we will get a new school, and it'll be a new beginning too. Our boys would be amalgamated with another local school, which is St. John's Girls' School, and they will be amalgamated onto one site. An awful lot of the past pupils and so on will be sad at St. Gall's closing down when it eventually does in the future. But I would be all for a new school, because at the end of the day the pupils deserve to be taught in surroundings suitable to modern education.
Clonard remains a proud and closely knit community. No matter how the bricks and mortar of the area change in the years to come, the people of Clonard are sure that the identity and spirit will live on.